So this summer, a dear friend of mine invited me to a digital mastermind in the Catskills. It was an impressive group of people from all over the world and all sorts of different professions. And you've already been introduced to one of the people who was part of that, Nikki Shaw, and she gave an outstanding intro to crypto that she shared with the group. You got a little bit of it in the interview that I did with her for the podcast, but I cannot wait to introduce you to today's guest and the host of that same digital mastermind that I attended. Now, I have been talking to everybody who would listen about financial freedom, and many of my clients and prospects and the listeners of this podcast are very much interested in financial freedom. But this guest right here, she says that there is something beyond financial freedom, and that is sovereignty. And we're going to be talking about that today. So what we want to do is we're going to do a deep dive into the concept of sovereignty and what it means for you today and what she thinks is possible so that we can expand your vision of what financial freedom really is as you kind of go forward. So I'm Felicia Gopal, wealth coach for professional, educated, and accomplished women, and your personal wealth builder. Welcome to the Her Money podcast. Keep listening to learn how today's guest is going to expand your vision of what it means. She was really instrumental in expanding my vision of what it means to be a financial planner. In fact, she told me that financial planners is a dime of a dozen. That kind of hurt my heart. She encouraged me to instead be a futurist that provides dynamic financial insights and wealth management in a digital age. So this is the type of person I'm bringing to you today. She's just like, she's thinking outside the box. So who's joining me today? It's Deana Denton. She's an executive with a unique ability to connect the dots. She deciphers new areas of opportunity for digital enabled value creation and assembles a team of players with unique skills to advance organizational objectives. She's a supply chain futurist and a collaborator within the creator environment supply chains. Deana, welcome.
Thank you, Felicia. Quite the introduction, and it's absolutely my pleasure to be here. You know, I'm just as excited about the topic as you are, so thank you for having me.
You guys don't understand. She can go deep on this topic. I'm going to just start with, the dictionary says sovereignty is the authority of a state to govern itself or another state. But think that you would think that sovereignty is a little bit broader than that. So tell me, what's your definition of sovereignty, please?
Sovereignty, in my mind, is the ability to kind of control your own destiny. You notice in your definition, it was by a state, right? Like the concept of a state or the controlling or the governing entity is what's changing and fluid in today's world, right? I'm part of an organization called Plumia that's looking to make the first internet-based country. Right. So like a country as a sovereign state is not necessarily land bound and something that was historically the boundaries of the US or the UK or Mexico. You get to define that in the digital age as just a digital construct that we articulate and that we put together. Right. So that goes from the country level to legal entity as a construct for sovereignty they're called DAOs. Distributed autonomous organizations, right? And then you take that down to sovereignty over your money, and that's cryptocurrency, right? Where it could be defined and domiciled anywhere in the world, right? On a server, on blockchain, right? And you control it with a distributed set of other stakeholders, right? So I'm really excited about the future because things where it wasn't even an option to have sovereignty over where you live, the country, and your affiliation for your passport, or your currency because it was state controlled, right? Or your job because you weren't part of the gig economy. You didn't have the power lever to say, I'm going to work from wherever I want, and I'm going to stipulate my rates and currency and payment methods, right? So today's generation is very fortunate because we are truly disrupting everything that we used to know as the rules, right? So sovereignty is the ability to shape your own reality and control it, with the hyper intelligence of the creative marketplace that we live in. I love what's happening in the artist and the creative space where they have sovereignty over their IP through NFTs, right? So sovereignty is very broad. I can own my IP. It's digitized. There's rules that say whenever it's resold, I get a commission, right? I have visibility of where it is, exactly how many copies. There's a watermark or a digital tag on it that says this is mine. I'm the originator. I'm the creator, right? So that's everything from our IP to our visas and our citizenship to our currency to our job, where we are sovereign and control our own schedule, our terms of employment, so on and so forth. So it's a beautiful thing, right? Like we get to make all the rules. Nobody controls us. It's the ultimate freedom. Sovereignty is.
It's so much broader. I mean, because when I think of financial freedom in particular, because that's what I often will talk to my clients about, and that's what they gravitate towards me. This is really taking it to the next level. It's not just being able to live wherever you want. It's it's aligning yourself with a nation that isn't in a place for
Yep,
and
that has the same values and goals where you guys have synergy of your values and your goals. So I can choose to say, I don't want to work 20 years, put $2 million into a house, be subject to $60,000 of recurring taxes of which I can't control. I can decide, hey, I want to align with a country that respects my goals, that has fair tax and compensation, and where when you buy a house, maybe you own it outright. There's no such thing as a property tax, right? People are making choices, and they're, especially as they retire, to say, oh, do I want to, live somewhere where I own something? I truly own it. I can garden. I can live rent free. I have my water supply. I have a well, right? There are a lot of places in the world where the concept of property tax, it's not even valid, right? They tax you on your wages, but once you don't have wages anymore, there's no taxes, right? So like you get to choose that. You do not have to accept what is it? I think in some parts of Jersey, the average is almost $30,000 a year in property taxes. I have friends that live in Jersey. Property taxes are crazy, right? So like you get to control your financial vulnerability, and your financial degree of freedom, right? What's variable, right, and uncontrollable, fixed, controllable, fixed, non-controllable, right? Like you get to control that now. You get to make those calls.
so if you are pursuing a sovereign lifestyle, if you
Mhm.
will, um, how would it be expressed in the financial world? My world is the financial world. I'm not
Mhm.
a country. I'm not a so how would it be expressed in the financial world?
In the financial world, I would make sure that the organizations where I keep my assets, that I have some degree of control and I can vote with my feet, and that I'm part of a governance organization where alignment is kind of guaranteed, right? I can choose, like you think about blockchain and you think about Bitcoin, right? And the fact that it's mobile, it's fluid. You can take it from one wallet to another wallet. You can take it anywhere in the world and get access to it, right? Because it's on a distributed ledger and it's not subject to truly the control of any particular state, unless you're buying it from a organization, a company that is domiciled, let's say in the US or the UK, but you can find a country that's aligned with your perspective, right? On blockchain assets, right? There's some countries that are going to tax that, the value as it sits on the blockchain. Some are not going to tax it until you pull it out and you spend it, right? You get to choose based on the rules that you want to live by, right? So I probably won't go to Amsterdam or the Netherlands because I don't want to be taxed on it just sitting in the bank right at the end of the year, a snapshot, like property taxes, right? So you get to make that call intelligently and control your own financial wealth value, right? Your own valuation over time.
You, you guys, I can't even get out my sentences here because I'm telling you, when I went to this digital conference and they were having this conversation, it was not even in the world that I was operating in inside of. And so I can see if you were sitting here or walking and you're just like, what the heck are they talking about? I mean, that's the whole concept of sovereignty, and part of why I wanted to bring you Deana was she's talking about that because I think you're not reading about it unless you're in specific worlds. You're not hearing about it again unless you were in certain worlds. But if you are looking to be a global um,
Nomad or expat or global citizen, and you want to optimize your ability to move around the world and make controlling decisions on your life, your assets, your own well-being, right? Now the information is out there posted. You can, like I say, the world has become LeBron James. You think about the ultimate athlete that's in a position to choose what team that they play for, where they play for, on what under what terms. Now some of the best digital and creative talent, they are their own LeBron James. They are like a little GDP bucket. So, if you're like Beeple, like who's an NFT artist, and he made like $40 million from selling his artwork, just his life's work, a few years ago, to made the news, right? So, like, if you're like Beeple, you can just choose where you want to go. Places like Malta are like, hey, would you come and domicile out of here? You just buy a house here, live here, spend money here. People are courting them as though they are LeBron James, right? And so, but you don't have to have that skill. You don't have to take it to the bucket like that. But the skills of the digital age, which are much more attainable than becoming a LeBron James equivalent, right? They're there
Right.
for you if you put in the hours, you put in the work, and you think and you read and you collaborate with others, right? So that's what I think is the beautiful part. It's democratizing knowledge, right, and access to being in a position where you have much greater control of your life.
Yeah. So I had Nikki on last week or so, and Nikki was talking about this whole concept of crypto was supposed to democratize the world. And and I'm sitting here. One of the things that really struck me when you and I were talking at this thing at the mastermind was it seemed like governments are trying to like wrap their minds around it, and they haven't quite figured out how to tax it, how to handle it. I was talking at that mastermind, there was somebody who was talking about there was something they wanted to buy, but in the United States they couldn't buy it, and so they had to find a workaround to do that. I
Yep.
mean, it seems to me that governments have not really caught up with this concept, and I can imagine that they would not be excited about people taking their
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 assets and their tax base, and making it more fluid, and them actually having to compete on something other than the fact that you were born here and I have a monopoly on you, right? It
right.
doesn't matter if you were born here, you don't own me anymore because I'm a citizen of the world and I'm on the world stage and everybody is bidding for me. Because if you really think about the future, people need some of the best in class developers, software, AI experts, digital health people, the kind of people who can figure out how to do gene editing and stop disease from happening so you don't have a multi-billion-dollar impact and you don't have closure of your economy. It's like, how much would you bid for the best CRISPR-9 person that can keep disease from coming and ruining and taking your economy offline? How much would you bid for that type of digital health professional, right? So like it's the power lever has moved from governments to individuals, right? And governments are truly going to have to compete and market themselves, and legislation and lobbying is going to truly be more democratized because you're going to have to meet the demands of the majority and not a minority, which is how our current system is set up. If big companies, big business, lobbyists, right, and people that just have built-in influence and special position as a minority group, that are controlling the majority. Like, so as the world becomes more digital, more educated, and it becomes the norm, right? Digital skills, right? It's really going to be, a fight to the end. It's a really amazing opportunity for disruption. Any country can become Switzerland tomorrow. Switzerland is uniquely positioned, right, as one of the world's banking centers, Switzerland and Singapore. But anybody who's just really smart, any country like the Maltas of the world, the Estonias, the Croatias of the world, they are really curating some really cutting edge legislation and policy to attract nomads and to attract certain types of industries. Like Malta was trying to attract the gaming industry and they were trying to become a blockchain center, right? That was a smart move. Like in the digital world, there's not that many barriers to becoming the next Switzerland, right? Like it is a free for all. It's like the Roman Colosseum days. Like it's going to be blood everywhere. And it's going to be interesting to see who's still standing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm just kind of wondering, inside of that, I mean, one of the things that is true currently is there's the have and the have-nots, the people who know and the people who don't. And I'm
Yep.
just kind of wondering if I'm trying to build a community of people who know this stuff, what sorts of skills do they need to develop? What do they gotta bring to the table so that they can participate, and rather than being somebody who watch other people build their wealth in this way or move their wealth around the world in this way?
So the number one skill of the future, is, it may sound cliche, but is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. The people who are dynamic and fluid and they can learn new skills, because things are hot for a moment, but you have to continually evolving. First it was, what was it? MySpace, Facebook, TikTok, all these, right? They're constantly Instagram, right? You've got to kind of know what the next big wave is, right? So people who are not afraid of change, right? And if you have a digital DNA and your first thought is to say, how do I do this in a digital and autonomous way, leveraging AI? Those are the people who are going to really, excel, in the new world. In the future, humans are the batteries of the robot economy, right? We're the ones that ideate and we give the robot something new to do and a new challenge, right? In the world of Star Trek, when you look at, Picard and Captain Kirk look at the computer and they ask them questions, right? So it's not our job in the future with hypercomputing to know what the answer is, because all the answers are going to be patterns and it's going to be learned and we'll lean on the computing, right? But our job, which is a harder job, is to know what questions to ask, right? So that the dots get connected and we get the insights that we need to thrive and to constantly innovate and ideate, right? And to exponentially enable humans to do more and more and more. Like I found it really interesting. I had a conversation with some folks and they were like, oh, I really can't, I don't like change because it's really hard and this job gets harder and I just want to ride it out, do my SNOP, do my little checklist, and I want to retire and I have my little timeshare in, let's say in Hawaii, and that's all I want to do. So they're really incremental people. They're really small. They have their hand closed as opposed to open, right? To see what they could receive. And then you have the people that they're not worried about just riding out that job. They are really focused on disrupting themselves and figuring out, how do I jump from a scooter to a 5-speed car to an automatic car to an autonomous car, to no longer where I even move myself via car. I move myself via beam me up Scotty, right? Those are the people that we need of the future, that they are hyper about self-disruption and jumping forward and leapfrogging, right? And so that person that was concerned about holding on to that job, let's say in Detroit, and just riding it out, they're worried about 1 week timeshare in Hawaii, whereas the real thinker, AI, is thinking about, how do I go to space? How do I go find a planet that is Hawaii and I own it myself? The whole doggone planet. So there are big thinkers and then there are little thinkers, right? That constrain that their reality is never going to be bigger than what they've experienced to date. They can't even imagine the art of the possible.
Wow. Can't even imagine the art of the possible. Now, those are some powerful, powerful words. So, again, you guys, I told you she was going to expand your mind beyond whatever it is that you were thinking about before you sat down today. So, let's just kind of, we've started to talk about how it affects finances. I know that you are in some groups where they're talking about the future. What are people talking about in terms of the future and where things could be potentially going?
So, I think the biggest thing is, your assets, your book value, of how you manage and how you curate your book value. Some people have their savings, their 401k, and then they have their house, and then they have their investments. It might be rental property, it might be a stock portfolio, right? A lot of that is being challenged to say, what's the right percentage that should be in cryptocurrency versus the right percentage that should be, in stock for, digital native type of companies versus the right percentage that should be in global real estate, global assets, right? And in businesses that present an annuity for you. Like literally, I do think in the next 20 or 30 years, everybody is going to have some type of annuity that's just part of who they are. You are your own brand. It becomes an annuity, whether you sell content, or you sell services, right? I think you could brand yourself in a way like influencers do, right? Like many of us will have our own version of an annuity that's based on our own individual brand. So don't forget that we're going to have new revenue streams in the future, just whether it's your podcast, right? And people just tune in to you, right? And then, or whether it's your assets, which don't have to be fully owned by you. That's the beautiful part of what's happening. The world has been disintermediated with the concept of Airbnb. There's a lot of Airbnb millionaires where they don't own anything, right? They have actually leased the property that they make it to an Airbnb, and then they make money on top of that, right? So like people's imagination and their ability to optimize leverage in their investment portfolio is reaching new heights. People have monetized the whole sharing economy. People lease out their car on Truro. They lease out things that they're not using in their garage on a gazillion types of apps, right? I mean, what people are leasing out and getting annuities from in terms of just the sharing economy is enough to blow your mind. It's not just your house, it's not just your car, it's literally everything. I've seen sites where people lease to say, hey, I own a chainsaw. If you want to rent it locally, here's my neighborhood, and it's just $40 for the day, right? And I'm just fascinated, that people have figured out a way to monetize everything in their life.
Wow. 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 Yeah, I just got introduced to that car leasing thing, and I was in Scottsdale, and I was spending $100 a day, and the guy was just like, "Oh no, I do it through that. What did you call it?
Truro.
I did it through Turo, and I'm spending $40 a day. And when I went to go check it out, I was just like, there were people were leasing out all kinds of cars. It wasn't just, my Hyundai sitting in the garage. People were leasing out their Teslas and all sorts of things. And I was just like, that's wild. That's completely wild. And I'm sure that that's just the drop in the bucket compared to how creative other people have been.
Well, funny enough, I saw an article today in New York, and it was illegal. But what somebody had done is taken a bunch of vans, put a bed in them, and they were leasing that out as Airbnbs in New York City. I laughed, and then they got busted, and they were getting $90 a night, and they were telling people, "Here's the key to the van, pop in the back, and that's where you sleep." And then 2 blocks away is a coffee shop, and they have a shower, they have a bathroom, and you can go there, or like they literally had the list of where you go to the restaurant, where you go to the bathroom that's available, open 24/7, and near where the van was parked. And I'm like, now that's over the top.
Yes, that is over the top.
I mean, but human ingenuity, people are going to find ways to monetize everything, right? And it's just really interesting. The subscription economy, I've seen really interesting sites, especially for moms that are really into social sustainability, where they it's a lease subscription for clothes for a kid. You just kind of give the dimensions of your kid, like how tall are they, their weight every week, and then they send you the next set, and you send in that set, and then it gets cleansed and goes to the next child that's getting up to that level. And so they're very eco-conscious, and I think so. Everything has become either an eco-conscious sustainability, cryptocurrency, distributed economy, and sharing economy theme, right? And so that all plays into our revenue and our annuity stream, and it plays into the valuation of the things that we buy and their payback period. Nothing, if you live your life right, nothing is a liability or expense. Everything is a revenue generator, right? And a lot of those things that are revenue generators can become just long-term appreciable assets. Like, I mean, like it's such a foreign concept that we could buy money and store money, and that it's appreciating and to the level that some of these cryptocurrencies are, right?
Well,
Like, better than real estate, some of them have returned, right?
right.
So I think it just totally disrupts your traditional thinking and the constraints and what's an asset versus a liability. For a matter of fact, one of the ladies, big time into the blockchain education, she has t-shirts that she sells assets over liabilities. And I love it, right? And it's just figuring out how do you monetize everything. Me, when I bought my country house upstate, it's never really been much of just a pure liability. I've always kind of made money off of it. There's so many ways to make money, and it's beyond just the rental income. Whether it's the right to camp on the land, whether it's carbon footprint accounting, like where they pay you for the trees, and the right to offset, pollution. Like there's so many things that with land and home ownership that, are potential revenue possibility. So like I said, you really cannot have a liability and an expense mindset you have to figure out everything that you bought, everything that you spent. How does that dollar become a revenue generator for you?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, think
I
about
just,
churro. The car is not an expense. Remember when we would say you drive off with the car and it lost 20% of its value, right?
right,
But now with churro, if you play your cards right, you can get an ROI on that car with short term, especially in the cities where people just really needed to go 5 miles, from their Airbnb to the restaurant and to see and do their own drive through the city. Much cheaper. It's not like they're doing 2,000 miles over 2 weeks and driving across the country with your car. You're just picking up a local car and you're just using it to get around to save you that 25 or $30 for every Uber ticket, Uber ride, right? But not that
right,
Uber is not a bad deal either.
right. Yeah, because I mean, because when I went to Scottsdale, really, I went to my meetings, I came back, I went to the store, the store was in walking distance, but it's a new city. I don't know the thing. So, at a certain point, I'm not walking because I don't know where I'm walking. I know how close it is, but I don't know the neighborhood. As a woman, I'm
Yep.
not walking all over to do whatever. But if I had known about that service, I would have just hopped in the car, gone to the store, and felt very, very comfortable. So I think that part of what I'm trying to do with today's podcast and having Deana on here is to just kind of expand your mind. And because I think it's going to take a little mind expansion in order to really fully get what Deana is talking about, in terms of, turning assets into, turning liabilities into assets, taking things that you already own and perhaps making it a revenue stream. I love this concept because I know that you talked a lot with a artist there about her art. And I mean, the concept of art was something else that you were really kind of focused on because we had an artist there. But you were talking about her being able to get paid on that for
While
year
she
over year
sleeps.
over year while she sleeps. And I think that this is a my wild concept. It's not what people like myself have been talking about. It's not how people like myself are normally helping people grow their wealth. But I think that there's a lot more that is not being integrated that people can take advantage of to really grow and build their wealth.
Exactly. And it's funny, like the art thing, like artists have to really they have to train themselves to become very business savvy. So if you think about artists, like I was talking to Kay to say, hey, I want to make sure you position yourself to get annuities, right? To make money while you sleep, to be on a marketplace, right? You listen, you post your art pieces on OpenSeas or on some type of digital marketplace so that people are seeing it and they're buying copies. The strategy is to understand the channels, right? And just like when you buy, let's say Donna Karen clothes, you might go to Macy's. That's one channel. If it doesn't sell in that season at Macy's, you might get lucky and see it in Ross's for like 75% off in a year. That's what we mean by different channels, different price points. And I wanted to make sure that she was on premium places like, wearables, right? To the open seas down to, hey, if it's not selling there, or maybe the market that's better is one where you sell it more as a commodity and selling one version. You say, this is one of 3,000 prints, right? But the key is to optimize the channels that you IP on, optimize the pricing for each channel, and to make sure that you're making money as you sleep. You put a beautiful piece out there 8 p.m. and you go to bed at 10 and you wake up in the morning and somebody overnight in China or Singapore or Vietnam has bought that print, that NFT, and they just love it. And they're displaying it in their restaurant, maybe on a screen of their restaurant in Vietnam. Like that's like your your market is global, and a lot of people still can't get their mind wrapped around the fact that your market is not the 50 people who show up at that museum that you used to show up with canvas and it was on the wall and you only had one day or you had 1 week of the showing and it was only who showed up during that time. Like your market is so much bigger. It's 24/7, 365 and global instantly in the digital world. And people have to get used to that. And then because you're making money as you sleep in your own domestic country and potentially in other countries, now you have to start thinking like corporations and say, oh, if 60% of my sales are happening out of Vietnam, or out of Singapore for whatever reason, the Asian market loves me, then you better think about having a legal entity in the Asian market and let it recognize the revenue over there, figure out your transfer costing, how much money you're going to make over there and what you might expatriate and bring back, right? Because you've got to optimize the global tax schema to your own advantage, the same way corporations do. You become a corporation and you need to learn how to think like a corporation.
Yeah. This is not something that most people are thinking about. I've got a number of people that I've worked with, and they're just like, "Hey, you know what? I want to be. I want to be a digital nomad. That's the new thing. Everybody wants to be a
Yeah.
digital nomad, and so they want to be in these various different countries." But I think one of the things that you talked about during this thing is there are you alluded to it earlier. You don't want to have your money in
Certain countries.
in certain countries. You were also talking about, making sure that you have a passport in multiple countries. Talk to me about those two issues, please.
Yeah. So this is interesting. A lot of people don't pay attention to the details that matter. So you just want to go travel the world, and let's say maybe you love marijuana. So you're going to go spend 6 months out of the year in Amsterdam. Well, if you spend a lot of money and you invest a lot of money in cryptocurrency, you need to understand that, in Holland, cryptocurrency is taxable, as an asset, or at least it was a last update I had from some of the tax accountants. And they said, hey, that one there's a snapshot taking, at some point in time on the course of the year, just like with property taxes. What's the valuation of your house at the end of the year? Pay 1%, 3%, whatever the local tax rate is. You may never realize that because, cryptocurrency is highly volatile. When you have to sell it 2 or 3 years later, you may not have ever realized that gain that you paid as a percentage of tax, right? So you need to be conscious of those domiciles where things are taxable as an asset for its whole value versus taxable only upon a sale event, right? So you have to take that time, right? And it's kind of like, I don't know if you've heard any of the conversations that the sports guys have. The big time athletes, they get pissed at California because California counts how many games. If you got a 10-game season and 2 are in California, they take 20% of your salary and they multiply by California taxable rates. Like they go deep into your pockets, and
Right.
and so people are down to the point. Some athletes talked about, like, I fly into California games the night before, late midnight. I roll up in there. They're counting days and percentage of your revenue, and it's not necessarily just the revenue that you make from that game. You have to be concerned if those are just 25% of your revenue and 75% is endorsements and rental income, your whole income is taxable. And I learned that lesson the hard way with Franchise Tax Board because I went to graduate school at UC Berkeley, and I didn't work on the year I graduated for 9 months. And I went off to Seattle, Washington. So you start a new job after graduate school and you make most of your money between September and November. All I did was teach a summer course, and I think I may have made $2,000 or $3,000, nothing, right? But then I started a professional job. Years later, somebody went back and calculated and said, hey, you were in California for 66% of the year. So 66% of the 99% of your money you made somewhere else is taxable in California. And I'm like, yo, cray, you don't ever have to worry about me stepping my foot on Cali land again. I'm done, right? That's just too complicated, right? And I
Yeah.
was a consultant for many of my years, right? And I was in 2, 3, 4, 5 states, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York. And it's painful. If you don't have a really solid, intelligent accountant, you could end up, paying people to work, right? Because you pay 10 states 10% and somebody doesn't get your reciprocity right, you didn't make nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you mean like your accountant is your most important friend when you're a fluid worker and you work, right? So you need to understand local rules. You need to understand, national, global rules as you go across borders. And that is definitely worth your time to sit down. If you're going to be a nomad and go somewhere, you need to sit down and understand which countries you're flowing through, which ones you're actually making money in, and which ones where even if you're not making money, right? If you got a nomad visa, you better understand the conditions of that. Like, is your only local income taxable that you may have made while you were there teaching English remotely, or is your global income taxable? You just got to learn. It's worth your time to go study and know what your liabilities are.
Absolutely. Because one of the things that you were sharing with me is there are certain countries where your US passport is not good. because they don't
Yeah.
want to have to deal with the fact that they have to pay
Report on you. They have
report
to do
on.
all kinds of banking reporting on you if you do anything. And sometimes they don't even want to deal with you. They're like, no, because I gotta report back to the US every inbound over 10,000, blah, blah, blah. Just there's some they just don't want to deal with you.
Well, I live in California, so I understand the whole tax situation. I mean, it's maddening as somebody who lives here. My brother used to work for the franchise tax board, and I remember
Woo!
talking to him sometimes, and it's just like he'd go and it's just like, so what you got to do is just write me a check for $1 million. It's
Yeah.
just, it was painful for these people. They're just like, what are you talking about? He was just like, well, it's for this, this is it. Just like, oh my God, this is so crazy. It's one of the reasons why a lot of companies are more and more companies are leaving the state. And I completely understand it.
Yeah, yeah, it's too complex. But I said that's part of the evolution where states and governments are going to have to compete, right? And they're going to have to simplify, tax law. They're going to have to make it fair and balanced, right? Because it's not always fair and balanced, right? And yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. Like the market has changed. It's going to be all about competition now. You don't just get to be big brother and not be held accountable. And then the young generation, they don't mind paying taxes, but they want their taxes to be spent on things that are aligned with their values. So, if you're not, let's say, with the Paris Accords and you're not stopping, the destruction of the environment, right? They may decide to vote with their feet, and not, say, I just think you're misusing my tax dollars. You're not making the world a better place, right? There's potholes here. There's hunger. There's lack of education. You treated these Haitians really bad. I want nothing to do with you, right? And you're messing up the environment, right? So my kids won't even have a safe place to reside and breathe air, right? So yeah,
Mm.
they're voting with their feet. They're going to hold governments totally accountable in the future, and I love it. And I really wish that in my 20s, when I was going through undergraduate, man, I wish we had the choices that these young people have today, right? I stuck it out in a very hostile environment, right? I went to a university where, diversity, and it was very it was very limited. We were some of the first, right? And I think there was only 3 Black people in my business school, right? So we were very close, and it was thousands of people, right? They weren't ready for us. We were still fighting, from just people getting used to to desegregation and everything. And it was if I could have voted with my feet back then to go to Portugal or to go to Mexico where brown people aren't treated that way, I would have been gone, right? But I had to suffer that. I didn't have the choices that we now have. And so the message I send to my nieces is, don't put up with Jack. Leave. You are the master of your own domain. You can live anywhere in the world that you want to. It is your oyster, right? We've been fighting for 50 plus years. When I left University of Texas, we were still talking about women's and productive rights, right? It's over 30 years later, and they passing laws criminalizing Uber drivers and everybody else that drops off a woman for her right to choose. I would hope that, sovereignty, owning, the right to choose culturally, legal wise, places where laws align with your own personal values of freedom and choice, right? Your own personal values of financial sovereignty and control. People are going to vote with their feet. And I love it.
Yeah, I love that. All right. You have expanded our minds. So let's kind of go into the easier part of today. Is I wanted to start with you know, money kind of flows through all of our lives. And I want to ask first and foremost, what's important about money to you?
That I have ultimate control of it, right? I'm all about currency, and that's why I'm excited about where we're going with cryptocurrency. So I really do, I believe in having sovereignty over your own assets, your currency assets, right? Because I just don't think that most sovereign states are responsible. You've seen the way we've been printing money, like, like, like we are just a very well-to-do man at a strip club. We're just making it rain, just printing, 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 right? And that just, we just have to have some fiscal responsibility. And I worry, so I want to have, flexibility to decide, hey, I'm not in agreement with you on that policy or this policy. And so I'm going to hedge my bets here, right? And so that's why it's really important to ultimately just, own your assets, own your currency, and be able to curate your own valuation based on your own educated choices.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Next question. I talk a lot about financial freedom, but financial freedom means different things to different people. What does financial freedom mean to you, Deana?
Being able to truly make the choices of your sovereignty around your financial instruments. That it's that simple, right? Whether my instrument is my house or my car, or the cash that I have in a bank account, right? Or cash that I have in a online crypto account, but just really where it is decentralized, where it's me and others that believe in the same principles and governance that I do, as opposed to a minority lobbyist group of folks who curate on behalf of everybody, but not in the best interest of everyone.
Is there a song that is the Deana anthem of where you are financially?
Yeah, so I thought about that, and that's like Diana Ross, ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley
Ooh,
low enough to keep me from my own sovereign management, right? Like people put up obstacles, right? But like I love the ingenuity. I love the fact that, there's so many others out there like me who are just really interested in continuing the disruption in this space and democratizing kind of access and glide paths to wealth, right?
so where are you guys hanging out? So if someone is interested in this topic and you have expanded their mind, it's like, where are you hanging out? Where are they getting this information so that they can really start to not just be financially free, but this other world of sovereignty? Because I think that it's a mind meld for them to think about it in this way. So where y'all hanging out? Because you ain't hanging out in the traditional places.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, so I'll tell you some of the best resources out there that I think are exceptional. There's a gentleman named Andrew, and he curates online videos and content called nomadcapitalist.com. I mean, he is on point with some of the most cost effective places to live and to be a best nomad. And he has this saying to say, go where you're treated best, which I think is phenomenal and makes sense, especially for Black people and especially for women, right?
Mhm.
And then there's another one called Nomad List, and it's kind of if you think of the Waze community where everybody comes together and shares intel to make everybody's life easier as they travel, Nomad List is like that for nomads. They bring intelligence on, what's it like health wise, safety wise, money wise, food wise, transportation wise, in any country you can think of. It's out there. And then they actually sponsor kind of get-togethers where you can meet other nomads and you can share experiences and insights that people are learning. So it's just this cluster of amazing intel coming together from people on Nomad List. And then there's a there's a Facebook group Wanda Duncan runs for, Black women travelers, Black women nomads. I think it is. You just Google Wanda Duncan, Black women nomads. You'll find there's a Facebook group you can request to join, and she shares inspirational stories of other women, and they're all on their journey, and they say, hey, I was in this job I hated in Detroit, and I moved to Turkey, or I moved wherever, right? I moved to Portugal, and they honestly share and support each other in that journey of taking a mind reset, taking a sabbatical, realizing your dream and just not letting anybody tell you you can't do it, right? In my life, I've taken major sabbaticals once every 10 years. I took one, my 30s for 15 months, and I traveled the world. I did my bucket list, did it again in my 40s, and I'm about to do it again. And I just think it's really good mental rest. We don't always give ourselves what we need for mental rest, right? And so I did that, and so I'm very much into supporting other women in their journey for rest, relaxation, and just finding where they belong and seeing the world and being a global citizen. So Nomad List, nomadcapitalist.com, the Black Women Travelers Group under Wanda Duncan. There's another one that I just attended, an Exodus Summit. It was an Exodus Summit, and let me look it up, the Exodus Summit. It was phenomenal to women that put that together, and they chose topics of interest to people who are on that journey to say, how do you reinvent yourself? What's it like being a nomad? What are some of the ways that you can make a living while you travel and see the world? One woman talked about being a house sitter. There's websites out there where people post that, hey, I'm a retiree. I'm going away for 6 months. I need somebody to just house sit. So you get free accommodations, sometimes really, really nice houses, right? But you have to maybe watch the dog or watch their cat while they're retirees and they go away and they travel for 6 months, right? And so you have free accommodations, and you do your own post, do your own Instagram thing, do your own training content. You're making money while you go, and you have no accommodation. So I think it's beautiful the way they share how to live the life of your dream without being enslaved, you know.
Right.
But yeah, let me look it up under. Yeah, it's called the Exodus Summit, you know. And so if they just Google Exodus Summit, I love it. It was amazing. I just actually signed up for that a couple of weeks ago, and I loved all the sessions. And they show you 2020 sessions, 2021 sessions, but it's things like that. And then the one that I'm most proud of, I'm on a Discord channel for an organization called Plumia. And so if you look up Plumia.com, let me make sure it's Plumia.com versus org. It's Plumia.country. So PLUMIA.country. And they explain to you the concept of our vision, our collective vision to create a internet-based country, right? So forget begging countries and going through H-1B visas to live somewhere. Screw all of that. If you are a hyper performer, the world is your oyster. You start aligning, and these hyper performers are coming together to say, screw sucking up to some other country. We become our own country if we negotiate our own rights of entry and exit, and you could end up having access to a lot more countries than one individual passport, right? It's beyond disruptive and brilliant, right? And they're sharing really amazing speaker series where I've listened to just absolute brilliant people talk about all kinds of topics, right? And I think Plumia is the best thing since sliced bread, and then of course, I want to help Plumia, and that's why I'm still, working with some, colleagues to launch kind of a complementary service, which is the Digital Renaissance, collective, to say, hey, we just really want to be the compass for people out there. There's so many sites, so many places to go to. Everybody needs that compass or that beacon that says, okay, which way were you trying to go? West? Okay, West, you're really interested in learning about crypto or currency, right? Okay, here's some resources available to you. Oh, you want to go east, and let's say that east means you want to learn about how you can sustain yourself, get jobs. Right here are remote.io jobs, such and such dot remote jobs, right? So it's a compass to say everything on your journey, like where do you go? What are some of the best sites? And it's very dynamic, which is why it kind of has to be like Waze. It takes a community to maintain it and to share information. And I think this community is just really anxious to help each other and lift each other up. And because we are bound by the same purpose.
And that purpose is?
That purpose is to make sure that everybody, can be their authentic self and have, sovereignty on every dimension of their life, right? And just really maximize their footprint here on earth, right? Like, yeah, you don't want to be one of those people 60, 70, 80, and you have regrets in life, right? What I love about this young generation is they live, in a way that, hey, YOLO, you only live once, and they're making sure that they get to taste everything, right? And they're like, I don't want to waste 40 years, 50 years, and then go try to travel all arthritic or whatever, or who even knows if there'll be a planet left. They're traveling now. They are smelling their roses while they're living, right? As opposed to roses at their funeral, right? And I love it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I do love that because I have young children, and I was fortunate enough to bring them to this thing. And I'm telling you, the kids that I took were very different from the kids that I left with. And I mean, they're asking curious questions, and I just think about I grew up in an era where you waited your turn, there was a way to do things, and people just, and that was kind of the road. And even as in my field, I've had and mentored people who were younger than me. And I remember having a conversation with this young gentleman, Samir, and Samir was just like, well, what I want you to do is I want you to look over this. And I was just like, that's not how we do things.
Yeah.
I told myself, that's not how we do things in our industry. And he was just like, well, this is the way I'm doing it. And I was just like, what is that? I
Yeah.
really look at myself and realize that the way that I did it does not have to be the way that he does it. And he does it, there is still legitimacy in him doing it the way that he was doing it. And I realized that I had created a world where it had to be this particular way, and he was not accepting that in any way, shape, or form. And so these young people, as you were saying, are up to some really cool and creative things, and I definitely have heard a number of them. I mean, the young people who are in my practice, who are clients of mine, they're all talking about traveling in their 20s and 30s. They are
Yeah.
not waiting until they
I
reach
mean,
their.
gap year became the gap lifestyle. They're just going to travel, right? Forget just doing it for 12 months. And I love it. And I'm like, good on you, because I think it makes them better if they're a world citizen. They have a perspective. They don't have these biases because they've seen what it's like to live in other places, and they've seen the value that diversity brings and a different way of thinking and a different way of living. And it just makes them better global citizens, more empathetic, more insightful, more innovative, right? Because they're inspired in different ways as part of that journey, right? And mindset is everything. Like you were saying that you had to change the way that you thought working with this gentleman, right? And it's like, I test people out on how mature are they on the digital maturity spectrum. I think I told you the example of cars, right? To say, some people think of a car as a car. Some think of cars as a service, right? Because it delivers mobility, right? And so if you've evolved yourself that you understand and you can translate almost anything into digital and the new way of thinking, either something as part of the subscription economy or the outcome economy, to say you're not leasing a car or buying a car, you are procuring mobility services, right? Whether it is you bought it one drink at a time through Uber, or you bought a car that has a life cycle of 50,000 trips, right? But at the end of the day, it's about mobility services. So mindset is everything. And then sometimes young people forget that since life is a subscription, you have to understand that life is fluid, right? They have a Spotify subscription or a Pandora subscription. Well, if you're a Prince fan, one year Prince may not be in the catalog. That is negotiated year over year. So you better have a contingency plan for everything. Like, this was gonna be a Prince party for New Year's Eve, but now it's gonna be a Tina Turner party because Prince got pulled from the subscription, right? So you just gotta have an alternative and be flexible, be agile, and just go with the flow.
Yeah, yeah, you do. All right. So I told you guys that this was going to be a little out of the box um, podcast, and I believe that we have delivered that. But it was juicy. It was good. It was really designed to open your mind and get you thinking about how can you design your life so that you're able to be agile and really thrive in this digital age. We talked about it not only just in financial services, but we talked about it in your life and in terms of your travel. There's lots of different ways that you can do it. And we just invite you to start opening your eyes, looking for opportunities. If you're an artist, think about how can you take your art and maybe make it an income stream. As you know, if you are whatever business you are in, you can do it. I'm telling you, you sit down and talk to Deana, whatever it is that you thought that you were doing, she is going to blow your mind and expand it. So Deana, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you and learn more about this digital renaissance, how would they get a hold of you?
Tell them to reach out to my LinkedIn profile, Deana Denton, and definitely put in the write up to say, hey, I heard you on Felicia's podcast, right? So they go straight up to the top, because I get a lot of vendors trying to sell me stuff too, right? So all the technology vendors. So I want to see Felicia Gopal in there. That way I know to click. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so is your website up? Can they go to your website yet?
Not yet, but I will actually add that to the LinkedIn profile soon, to just say also, here, so that way, as long as they ground it in LinkedIn, they'll always find me.
All right, perfect. And it's Deana Denton, and we will put her in our show notes for sure. So I just really want to say thank you very much, Deana. It's been tremendous. It's been outstanding. I've had a good time. I hope And I trust that everybody who was listening, you have gotten something out of you. So I want to thank everybody for listening and tuning into the Her Money podcast. For more episodes like this, just go to my YouTube channel, click subscribe button, and ring the bell, and you can choose all to get more notified of new content as it gets delivered. If you're listening on an audio podcast, I just invite you to please share a honest review on Apple, because more reviews means more awareness of the Her Money Story podcast. And if you want to learn to master your money and go from feeling like you are struggling to save, secure, and ultimately in control of your financial destiny, then I invite you to reach out to me and go for a financial breakthrough session by going to www.chatwithfelicia.com. You'll get directed to a link where you can fill out an application. If we find out that we're a fit, then you'll be invited onto my calendar. And I, again, thank you, Deana, so much for being with you. It's been a little bit longer than I promised, but I think that the audience got some really juicy things. And so I thank you very much for your time.